I love thinking about systems, and when you get to work with a lot of engineers and now a lot of entrepreneurs, you get to do that in both directions. Pace, I think, is the most underrated element of fit.
Oh, please tell me more.
If you take somebody who is very, very methodical and deliberate, sometimes the right decision is to wait, and that's totally fine, and we keep looking. Sometimes that can help them to see that, no, actually, I think we might regret missing this person.
They should have a little bit of FOMO in that.
Welcome to the Key Codes podcast, where we unlock untold stories behind success and discuss complex topics that offer a glimpse into lesser explored parts of the business world. In this episode, we sit down with Amanda Daring, CEO of global recruitment and HR advisory firm Nuance. Amanda shares key insights behind how she views talent analysis, why pace matching matters, and how perfect can sometimes become the enemy of good when it comes to hiring.
So you and I have been friends for a bit of time, but and obviously I know what you do and all the great work that you do with startups and everything, but I've never really asked the question around, like, how did you get started working with startups to begin with? Like, did you always know you were going to do this cool thing around staffing placements at these companies, or did that kind of just coincidentally happen?
Such a good question. Backing way up, I fell into recruiting because I started in finance and had some internships that showed me finance was not for me. And I got really lucky, and a company said, well, we need a recruiter and we like you. Do you want to do that? And so it'll tell you how long I've been doing this. I was literally checking out books from the library, like how to interview people. What is recruiting, right?
Really?
I got a desk and a phone, and they said, we need 10 interns. And I hit the ground running.
And this person that asked you to do this, they had worked with you while you were in finance?
They wanted to hire me for an internship in finance. Mm-hmm. And when I was turning them down saying, no, I had another one, thank you very much, it's not for me, they very kindly changed my life, offered me this other spot.
Oh, very cool.
And so then from there, started recruiting interns for them, moved into another technology company and learned all about technology. Then I was the director of people operations in-house at a boutique software development agency. Mm-hmm. So over the years, I learned a lot about technology and people, and I worked with some really incredible engineers who were kind enough to say, Amanda, we hate this. Amanda, we love this. Amanda, those acronyms make no sense together. And at the time, my job sort of started changing into maintaining instead of building. And so I was interested in what it would be like to build something. Mm-hmm. And so at the same time, every time I'd worked with an agency, I found it a pretty annoying experience.
Yeah. Always good to build where you saw issues.
Yes. I came into it as a dissatisfied customer more than anything else. And I just thought, gosh, there has to be a way to have context in this. There needs to be a way that we're not just, matching a keyword and clicking send and then sending you anybody who's breathing. And so I started Nuance from there. So my first hope was, okay, I hope people pay me and I'll be busy enough. And of course, a lot of our first clients were people I had worked with before. Mm-hmm. They were often engineers or in related roles in technology. And so that's how we really started in startups.
Oh, wow. What piece excited you most at the beginning? Was it the technology piece or was it the people piece? Or is it just like you just love the blend of them both?
Great question. I love thinking about systems. And when you get to work with a lot of engineers and now a lot of entrepreneurs, you get to do that in both directions. So I think the technology is cool. I love staying up to date on it. It's more the application that I find interesting. True. And so I guess that's sort of a cross-section of people and process.
Okay, so the people and the process thing. When you're working with these companies, are there any, do you ever go into a scenario where you're gonna do a search for a company and you're like, basically what they're looking for does not exist? Or do you guys work through that through the process?
Such a good question. It's definitely a matter of highlighting this is what the market is.
True. I've seen you do this. I've seen you do this now that you mention it.
So I did it to you. You didn't even notice.
You did.
So that's part of it, right? A pool of people exists or doesn't exist. And so shaping that way. I also think it's helpful to really get people thinking about what they're ultimately trying to accomplish versus what's listed in a job description. So people sort of like to start with, here's our job description. I put job description in ChatGPT and here's what it came up with. And now find me this person. And really, they should start with, in 12 months and 18 months, how do we know we hired the right person?
Ooh.
Because there's a lot of ways to solve that problem. That might be looking for a person with this background or that.
And backing into it like that is interesting. I don't think I've ever done that. I'm gonna take that nugget because I don't think I've ever gone like in 12 or 18 months and then back into then what does that mean in terms of needs today? That's an interesting way of doing it.
Where I thought we'd start is
I'm nervous.
So finances, money, capital, often a constraint, almost always, right? And it a lot of conversations probably for both of us start with, for you, I need capital to invest in the team. For me, we need talent, but we need to, we need to be thrifty about it because we're a startup. And similar to working backwards, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Is capital always the problem? Are there times when a company maybe couldn't handle more capital or it might make things worse?
Yes. I actually think there's a really fine balance of having too little capital where you're restricted, you can never get all the things that you want done. You're almost working from a scarcity mindset rather than, really going for the full potential of what you could do. And then on the other hand, you can't have too much capital where you're just making bad hires, where you're there's always a bottleneck, right? Like you can only go as fast as you can onboard and get up to speed. And even myself, like even growing a firm, which is small right now, but that is a bottleneck for me. When I bring someone on the team, I have to also have the time to onboard effectively, train proficiently, change management if we have any changes that go on, getting it out and getting it well understood. And so I think like the process piece is 100% also a limiter in terms of like, are you ready? And I think that founders should think about that when they're raising funds, plan forward before you get the funds in and understanding what that looks like. Oftentimes I say that the financials tell the story. So I'll give an example. We may have a founder and they're showing us their projections on revenue, and it's like, which is the right thing to do. Oftentimes, like milestone-based hiring, and so they'll say, once we hit this milestone, then we'll hire these heads. Well, you see the impact of the head immediately reflected in the revenue numbers. Whereas we know that people don't start selling like that in day one, right? Like people aren't that efficient when they, if anything, it's going to get worse for a little bit before it speeds up, right? And so I'm looking at numbers, but I'm reading a story from those numbers, and I think that you can see that there are other limiting factors aside from capital. What about you?
I agree with you. I think. Listen, of course, when you're not stressing over every dime, it's helpful. And that capital is real. Capital constraints are real. I do see sometimes people sort of adding because they think they should add versus doing that exact working backwards, right? So thinking about, well, everybody else adds a CXO at this point. And
that's true.
And actually, not saying, what are they going to do? Yeah.
That's actually a good point around I never thought about that, but I have had, and founders will say it out loud. They're like, well, usually this is the next hire that like, I've seen other companies do, and then that's their path as well.
Absolutely. And I've seen people take it too far in the opposite direction too, where they're pretty myopic and they're not thinking, okay, companies, lots of startups have done this. They've been on this road. What are the challenges they've encountered? What are some lessons learned? You know, I think sometimes founders are trying to do everything with full originality.
You don't have to repeat the reel every time.
Yes. And I don't know that that's the right, you know, it's probably a good mix that's somewhere in the middle. Speaking of, you know, when you are evaluating a founder and you're thinking about investing in them, that's ultimately a talent evaluation you're making too, right? You're thinking about their capabilities. What are the things you look for? What are some of the signals you've learned?
I feel like every time I get asked this question, it changes. But you know, I'm looking for a couple of things. I'm obviously looking for, do they have some sort of like keen insight into this? Like what uniquely positions them, or what unique perspective on this particular problem statement or market, or however you want to view it, right? Do they have that is like not the obvious? Because I think in VC, like largely this stuff is non-consensus, right? If it was obvious, everybody would just do it and be pickers. And I don't think that I'm a picker. I think that I try to pattern match and find key attributes that oftentimes or more likely to increase the probability of success. But I would be lying to you if I told you that I thought I was like this excellent picker. But so, you know, keen insight into what they're doing, something that, you know, a perspective on this thing that like most people could not or would not have because they haven't either lived the experience or worked, you know, in that industry, or, you know, those sorts of things. I like founders that this wasn't always on my list, but it is now. I like founders that do, even at the earliest stages, know some numbers. And what I mean by that is like even before you've sold your first ever piece of product or software or service, whatever it is, you have certain assumptions about this thing, right? And those assumptions drive numbers. So a question that I always ask every founder is like, what's the quantifiable value prop? What is the return model or process that your customer is going to go through in order to evaluate whether or not whatever price you set is worth it? And most founders at the earliest stages don't know that because they haven't talked to enough customers to have it. But when you have talked to enough customers, that's the one number that you do have. You may not have revenue. You may not have all these things that are traction. But if you can show me a model where it was like, that ROI is a no-brainer. Like, of course they would pay you that much because here's the savings, here's the additional revenue, whatever that is. No, it's an assumption. But to have it is a big, big thing. And I can tell you, nearly none of them have it. So it's something that I really harp on with founders. You know, obviously, like grit, I like ex-athletes. I'm a little biased, but like grit and, you know, the ability to work with a team. You're not always going to love everybody that you work with, but we're all working together towards a common goal. Like, so those like intangibles that everybody says, like tenacity and all of that, that's the obvious. But those two are probably the main two on the first meeting where I'm looking for, like, okay, do they understand this piece? Have they talked to enough customers where they can like actually quantify this a bit, because you don't have any other data point.
So, I love that.
Yeah. What about you? When you're going out and you're sourcing, like you're looking for a role, are there like, what are the things that you're looking for? And I know it's completely dependent on the role that you're looking for, but are there any like common threads that regardless of role, like the person has to do this or have this? And are there times, I was always curious, are there times where you think you found the perfect call it technical fit, but it isn't a fit? Like you wouldn't take them for some other reason?
For sure, yes. I think, and that's a really tricky one because yes, there's competencies and there's all the other elements of fit. some that have to do with the person and some that have to do with the team and the company. So
Culture.
Pace, I think, is the most underrated element of fit.
Oh, Pace, tell me more.
If you take somebody who is very, very methodical and deliberate, which are good things, that could be a brilliant, smart, accomplished person, to be very clear.
Yep.
And you put them in a team where speed is, whether they are explicit or it's just implied, but like that's a huge core value that they have. Inevitably, in a perfect world, of course, we want, and it's true, a balanced team of diverse perspectives. But that can be too far apart, and pace especially can be such a point of tension.
That's interesting. That's a good point. I've seen that mismatch a time or two.
Definitely. Yeah. And I wish more people understood that oftentimes really brilliant people don't get jobs. And it's not what people think is the decision is, can this person do this job? Yes or no? Hired or not hired?
It's more complex than that.
Exactly. Because the reality is, okay, I have 4 people who all could do this job.
So what's next?
So if I'm the employer, I need to think, okay, where are we headed? Maybe this person's career trajectory lines up perfectly with our plans for the next 24 months. Maybe this person has really deep industry expertise, and that's going to be the deciding factor, even though these other people are also really smart, can also do this job.
Yep.
And I wish more people understood that, because I think it would make the decline feel less personal, because it's not. They could be really talented.
That's true for startups too, right? Like I always tell, founders, I'm like, just because you get a pass from a VC or an investor, there's so many other things that go into that aside from just the interaction with you, right? Like, where are they in their fund life? What is their portfolio construction at the moment, right? Like, there's so many other things where it could have just been it was not the right time. And I really believe in this founder, and I think you're gonna be successful. So I was just, when I was I was talking to someone earlier, and I was like, I don't have FOMO when it comes to investments. Like, people have asked, like, oh, will you, if you pass on a company and then they go off and they become a unicorn, they're like, would you? I would not have FOMO on that. I would not feel, in fact, in Wisconsin, I would love it because Wisconsin needs a big win like that. So I would think that is overall better for the ecosystem, and thereby is going to help me anyway, even if we pass on it. And the reason that I feel that way is because of this. There are a number of reasons why we have to pass, for one, right? Like, that are outside of just the founder and what they're doing. And two, like, at our stage, like, there's no traction and data point where you can, like, with a high degree of confidence, know one way or another, whether you pass or go into a deal. And so why would I feel bad about that? Like, the Airbnb and Uber thing came up earlier, and it was like, well, if someone told you're an investor, and someone was like, no, this is years ago now, hey, after the bar, tipsy and all, we're gonna go get in the car with a strange guy. He's going to give us a ride home, right? Like, you would be like, nah, I'm not in. That sounds crazy. But at that time, it probably did seem crazy. So I'm not surprised.
Sure, people love to do that. The hindsight of like, oh, I would have known.
Like, yeah, like, oh, I would have seen that from the, like, no, you wouldn't have.
For sure, people can do that in the hiring process too, where they take one little thing someone said and sort of extrapolate it, right? Which is why it can be helpful to be doing it with someone like Nuance, where we could say like, oh, like, hang on a minute. What did they actually say? Okay, well, maybe we should just ask them again. We should just have a conversation about that, because you seem to have leapt from, this little nugget into they're leaving tomorrow. And I didn't hear that. So I think, people just jump to these conclusions, and, it's just the way humans are.
Yeah.
I would say the other thing I look for, and I think this is a little bit unique, is people generally can only really understand and assess sort of 2 standard deviations from where they are. So I'll explain. So if I'm terrible, I can't really distinguish between good and excellent.
Oh, yeah, I see where you go. This is true,
or if
actually.
I'm excellent, I can't really distinguish between okay and terrible.
I agree.
And so there's a little bit of that sort of understanding those differences can actually be a really good way. So a question I almost universally ask, so I would ask you, what's the difference between a good and an exceptional investor? And I would listen for how specific is your answer? How much experience are you bringing into your answer?
Yep.
Because it's easy for me, a non-investor, to say, oh, you could look at their returns. And you as an expert would be like, that's not like a great answer.
It's like, hindsight is 2020. How would you know earlier?
Yes. And so I like that question. What's the difference between a good and an exceptional whatever? I find that very telling.
We mentioned pace earlier. In your experience when you're doing these executive searches and that sort of thing, technical searches for these companies, is there ever a misalignment between the work that you do or the expectations of how quickly things happen and that you get placements and that sort of thing? Like, are they trying to get you? They're like, I hire you today and tomorrow, Amanda, where's my CTO?
You know, certainly by the time someone comes to us or we're in it, right? Usually people are hiring because they have a pain point, because there's too much work and not enough people, because there's a problem going unsolved. Like, these are important, urgent things. And so baked into the way we built the process is that, right? To move with a lot of speed. The other reason for that is that this is true in any kind of selling, but it's definitely true in recruitment. You know, time just kills momentum. It kills enthusiasm. So interestingly, I would say we're probably more often in the seat of like, we're going to need to get a next step on the books. Like, we're going to need an answer. I think that happens more often. Certainly there are cases in which somebody is like, well, it's been 2 days. Like, where are the people? You know, where are the people? But I think more often we're on the other side going, okay, they're not going to still be available. Yeah,
you can still get an offer, right?
And listen,
they're great talent.
Exactly. And it's not through any fault of this founder or the hiring team or whatever. They have 100 priorities. And our job is to like make it really easy for them to move forward with this one. But yeah, when you ask about pace, that's what comes to mind.
Gotcha. What is your best practice in getting someone to move for your clock, right? Because you're incentivized to get a body there as well, right? Like, not anybody, but a quality, well-matched body. And so do you have scenarios where like, it's just like this team is not ready to bring someone on? They think they are, but they're not. Either they're not making the decisions, or maybe it's a group decision that needs to be made and they can't come to a consensus. Does that ever happen in this world?
Sure. I think part of it is educational, right? And so there are four things that can happen when you have a hiring process. One is, and that's what we're aiming for, we pick the right person.
Yep.
One, and this is also what we're aiming for, we decline the people who would be bad fits.
Okay.
People are very afraid of the third one, which is I hired the wrong person.
Oh, yes.
Everyone's had that pain.
Like,
everybody's scared. Nobody wants to be the one who said yes and then was wrong. You know, most people naturally are trying to sort of, not consciously, right? Because they do want the help, but there's an element of risk. And I don't want to accidentally hire the wrong person. And so I think our best practice is to really highlight that fourth risk, which is that you missed out on the right person. And that's a very real risk too. That if this is still open in 6 months and this person could have definitely learned this little piece of skill in that 6 months, is that a trade-off you want to make? And we don't make that for the client, but I think helping them to see you're not choosing between this person or perfection. You're choosing between this person now or waiting. And sometimes the right decision is to wait, and that's totally fine, and we keep looking. Sometimes that can help them to see that, no, actually, I think we might regret missing this person.
They should have a little bit of FOMO in that instance.
Because, of course, investors have milestones. You have fiduciary responsibility for any boards you're on, you know, things like that. And then I've seen it from the other side where, you know, founders also, of course, have their own timelines in mind. And it can happen that without meaning to, those two entities sort of diverge, and
Sure.
suddenly the founder is doing performance theater for the board,
Yes.
or suddenly the board is obsessed with a milestone that maybe doesn't totally blend with everything the founder is doing every day.
Yep.
That's such an interesting dynamic to me. Tell me a little bit, how do you manage that?
Yeah, it is interesting because I personally feel like this is a conversation that one has to happen pre-investment and then continues and remains a topic of conversation in future meetings. It's like when you're in corporate and you have like a team underneath you, like HR always tells you, like the first time they're hearing that they're not doing the right thing should not be when you're wanting us to put them on a PIP or give them a warning or something. You should have had touch points where you're talking. So I do try to, like within either our monthly touch points or quarterly touch points, like talk about timing, not only around like milestones and, the tactical operational aspects, but longer vision. Like, are we still aligned on where we see, because a funding round, for example, could change in a founder's mind their timing to exit. Their project. Now, all of these are projections and what we're aiming for, but what game are we playing and how, what are we shooting for? So I think that that's a continuous conversation that you have to have. I do think that you naturally get misaligned somehow. I think we as investors, one, we're not in it every day. It's not possible. You have a portfolio of companies and you're return driven. So, IRR is time based. And so you want to keep that in mind. However, you also are understanding of, needing the time to develop and to grow the business and to meet the milestones and that sort of thing. So I think it's continuous conversations, setting milestones and everybody being aligned on that. With any of our founders, like, we don't set the milestones for you. It's your business. But there's a conversation and agreement that that's what we're going to get after. Okay, then we're going to get after those things. So sometimes when you pose the question around like something that you presented as what you were going to do that did not get done, it can be like, well, are we misaligned on timing, or is this a problem with just me asking a question that's almost like accountability? Right. So there's that factor. From an operator's from the founder perspective or the operator's perspective, if I were them, I would want to always make sure that like I'm aligned to the thing. And if something changes, in most cases, if it's communicated, it doesn't really matter. I think that this gets, like I mentioned, it gets kind of like off the rails a little bit when you raise follow on, start getting later stage, because then you have so many people that, you have to report out to, that have their own expectations of timelines and that sort of thing. So it becomes more of an administrative just burden to keep everybody aligned and to do all of those things. So but I always tell founders, like before we write a check, before we invest, I'm like, do you understand what this means? Do you understand how we make return and how we continue to operate our business? And do you understand that is heavily time bound? Right? Like IRR is time dependent. So you have all these metrics, IRR, TVPI, multiple on invested capital, all those things that you're tracking to. But IRR is a big one, right? And time does decrease IRR. So you're obviously wanting to go as quickly as possible. The other thing is, to your point, you mentioned like the fizzling out. That is true in, running a business. Things shift so quickly. The market changes. So if you're a founder and your time horizon is like, hey, we see this playing out over 12, 15 years. I struggle with that because I'm like, who knows this world? Who knows where we are? Hopefully we're here. Like, it's so much
12,
that can
15 days.
happen.
No.
There's so much that can happen in that time period where you're like, I think about that. And I think about those things. I think about the mental, the required mental state consistently over all those years. It's like, running your own business, it is challenging. There are ups and downs. There are these swings. There's you're a person. You have life and health and family yourself, and they're just like bound. So the longer we go, the more opportunity for, potential travesty or like something to knock it off the rails, right? So, we try to communicate, and agree with the plan with founders, but obviously nothing ever goes to plan in this world. So we understand that. But like I said, it's just the constant communication back and forth to make sure like we're all aligned on even allowing me to help, like allowing us to add value as an investor. It matters, right? Like your urgency and everything matters on that. So
For sure. I think that brings up a great point I wanted to ask you about. Sometimes I think, yes, at startups, everything is messy, everything changes fast.
mm-hmm.
Then what's also true when you work with a stellar team is that they're often controlling a lot of what they can control within that, right?
Controlling the controllables.
Yes. And to your point, every single business, you peek behind the curtain and something is on fire. Every
All the
business.
time. Every day
Big,
there's
small.
a fire.
Yes.
Multiple fires. We're
Yes.
just picking which one we're going to put out.
100% true, and we all understand that. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I
Mm-hmm.
do see sometimes with some early stage teams, sometimes that can be sort of like an excuse for just everything to be
Mm-hmm.
a constant mess. And I get how it happens. And it's not like they want it to be a mess, but maybe they're like addicted to the busyness of controlling every little thing, or they're addicted to changing course.
Yep.
And it's too much, right? Like, how do you advise people and how to find that balance of like, yeah, it's gonna be a mess, but also we need to like deal with the stuff we can deal with and finish something.
I think part of it is the like glorification of like the entrepreneur. My mom's generation, if you said that you were self-employed, that would like equate in their minds that you're unemployed, right? Like that was like, so you don't have a job.
So no one would hire you.
Right? So no, you're not qualified for anything anywhere. Okay. But like now we live in a day and age where the word I'm an entrepreneur, you literally have people introduce themselves to you as I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm like, but what do you do? Right. And so I think part of what you're describing, this keeping busy, but not moving forward, like I'm going sideways or I'm at everything, but I'm not doing anything. I think that's like almost like the ego or the showing of like I'm an entrepreneur. And I don't know how you coach or advise against that. I don't even try. I just don't. We just don't. We try not to. We don't make those investments. But I also think that maybe, I don't want to say this for sure, an opportunity with the region for us. Like that may be like culturally something that we do here that is not always like widespread nationally. But I do think founders, like I always ask, what's the return? If you're going to every conference and everything, what was the return? Did you get a customer? Did you close a contract? Like what happened? And these partnerships and like all these things that don't equal anything. I'm like, what did it generate revenue in some way? If it didn't, we always have to at least talk about it. There are certain things that you do and maybe it doesn't immediately generate revenue, but it was still worth it for X, Y, and Z reason. But we got to know what those things are versus just showing up and it's almost like participating in everything in hopes that something lands. That tells me that there's no real strategy. There's no real clarity on direction. There's no real understanding or optimizing like how we get to our customers and in an efficient and meaningful way.
That makes sense. That actually ties back to that question you asked in the beginning, right? What's that ROI for your customer? Like if you are thinking about that for your customer, you're probably more inclined to think about that for yourself.
Yep.
And to be clear, of course, like we all make mistakes. We all went down a road.
Oh, yeah.
Whoops. Not that one.
That didn't pan out.
For sure. But yeah, I was just curious because I do see sometimes this sense of like, well, we're a startup.
Yeah,
and that's true. And like But sometimes it can be tighter.
I also think that it's even in the mix, like even in the chaos that is like startup land and entrepreneur land, there still has to be a method to the madness. So I say like founders, like I find that some of the best founders are really good at pretending to be scientists and pretending to be lawyers. And what I mean by that is you are so inquisitive and so exploratory in running hypotheses and having assumptions and testing those assumptions as if you were scientists at the beginning, because you have these beliefs, but you don't know anything. You don't know if anybody's going to pay you. You don't know if it's a real problem. You don't know how it relates to other problems that they have in their business. So you're trying to come up with a list of assumptions and as quickly as possible test those assumptions without making a large investment, right? In doing that. So that's the science part. And then on the lawyer piece, you are very methodical in the way in which you collect the feedback and collect the data on those, tests of assumptions, such that you're building a case as to why I, as an investor, or why, you're trying to get a team member that you probably can't pay market rate to, should join you and believe in your vision. And if you can do those things at the earliest stages, I think that one, you get to that ROI piece that I talked about much earlier, because the data comes through those experiments. And you start to like have enough to piece together, like, okay, this is the value that I think is there. And then it's continuing to test and iterate on that as well. But if you can be a scientist and a lawyer, and you're viewing your every day as a founder, is like every day I'm waking up as an early stage founder who has not yet found product market fit. And my job is to test as many of my assumptions as I can today and validate and invalidate them. And by the way, an invalidated assumption is just as good as a validated one, because it takes one thing off the table. So that's one thing that you have to process, think about, deal with. It's like, okay, I heard that a few times. Okay, I thought that was going to be true. It's not. It's just not panning out to be true. Now I don't have to think about it anymore. And it clears up all the chaos and the craziness so that you're not just doing busy work. So like, I think that founders need to have like a, there's obviously the North Star and the vision, and people are moving towards that, but like to be actionable and to be like operationally efficient and not just end up doing this little circle thing. I think you have to have a clear, like, okay, for this chunk of time, this week of time, this is my thing. This is what I need to, I have these assumptions, and my job is to talk to as many people as I can and like validate it or invalidate it without bias. And like, whatever it is, come back to the drawing board, and then we do the next thing. Right. So yeah, if that's showing up to conferences and just networking, great. But I think that it's better spent on like really focusing on who are we trying to get after, and who are we trying to speak to, and who can give us the most valuable input. Like, I talk to founders that have talked to more investors than they have customers, and I don't understand it. I don't. I'm like, why would that be a thing?
I think that glorification is probably part of it, right? Like the raise becomes not. I actually feel like we're in very similar shoes in this way, where the investment is supposed to be an input to an ultimate output, and so is hiring. Like, hiring is never the goal. The round is never the goal. They're both supposed to be tools that get you somewhere spectacular.
Absolutely.
And it's too easy to lose sight of that.
Absolutely. Founders get, we all can get sucked into that path. But I think with clarity on like strategy and so we say we invest in pre-revenue companies, right? And basically what people, I said that I was going to stop saying that, because basically people think that means that you can just invest in anything, right? And it's like, or you can't say that something is too early. And it's like, no, you can be pre-revenue, but have done a ton of like customer discovery and customer exploration and customer interviews. And I'm not talking about sending out surveys. Not that that doesn't help, like that's one aspect to it, but really sitting down and one, it shows me that you can actually get to your customers, which is mandatory in order to sell product, right? So if you can tell me, like, I sat down with, and the data on it actually doesn't even matter, where it comes out as like, can you quantify that value prop? People who can do that really well have talked to so many customers. It's
I love
impossible to do without it.
I love that. I really liked that frame you had. My job is. I think if you can have that as a founder, and then I think if you can embed that in your team, that's really powerful. You know, we find even when we're hiring for Nuance or for anyone, the amount of people who know what their job title is, but don't totally know. Like, for instance, I always like to ask recruiters, how does your company make money? Not what do you sell? How do you make money? Which divisions make more money than others?
Oh,
What's coming up on the roadmap in 24 months?
Yeah.
Because that stuff is absolutely going to impact
how you
approach your job.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people, well, we make widgets. Awesome. For who? How? How's it going? Are widgets, about to be illegal? Like, what is the...
You sell the same amount of those widgets as these?
These contextual elements are so big. And so I think for founders, to get really clear on their own, my job is, but I love that framing for each team member should be able to say, my job is because outcome.
Oh, that's actually good. I like that. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up here soon, but as kind of a closing question, then you can feel free to ask me any question as well. But if you're giving advice to technology company that's looking to do a really key strategic hire, do you have any guidelines and guidance that you tend to provide as their partner in this process?
Starting with that end in mind is huge.
Yep.
The next piece, right, that in 12 months, in 24 months, whatever timeline you want to pick, how will we know?
Yep.
If you can't answer that question, you're not ready. Answer that first. Second is once we meet people, and you should be thinking about this before you start meeting people, how will we know that this person can do the thing we just said? How do we know that they can double revenue? How do we know that they can fix retention issues within the team? How will we know? So sometimes the answers to that are what they've done before or components of it. They have some kind of track record that matters.
Demonstrated it in a prior role.
Exactly. Sometimes it's, that we feel a really tight values alignment. And as we map out this process, we're building the process around how will we know instead of building the process around, well, they should just meet everyone. And then 8 interviews later, we'll just get in a room and say like, okay, so Dana, right?
Dana's always the right pick.
Yes. And they'll say yes because it's Dana. But, if you give everyone sort of within perfect framing, I haven't said it like this before, but I'm going to start. My job is, give them a my job is for the interview process. My job is to understand their technical capability. My job is to talk about this value.
Oh,
and
that's
not that you
perfect.
don't talk about more than that, but if you give someone sort of something to anchor, then they're really assessing instead of, well, this is fun. Because you can really easily fall into, I like them, I don't like them. Oh. And that's not a good decision either.
Yes, I've seen that happen, yes.
So those would be some of the big frames. It's like, how will we know?
Gotcha.
What will they do and how will we know?
Those are good gems. You just gave it free $99.
Call Nuance.
Call Nuance. Seriously.
I wish we had a 1-800 number. I would say it right now.
This would be a good time to plug it. Well, thank you. I appreciate you for doing this with me. Hopefully we get to do it again some other time. Just pick random topics and talk trash and give our perspective on it. I
feel like we gave people a little preview of what we're like ish at a happy hour.
Yeah, it's true. This is a lens. We don't have drinks, but this is a lens into our happy hour conversations. That's so crazy that's so accurate. So
we're such nerds. But thank you.
Thank you again for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.